This is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint. Now, your host, James Just.
Thank you for joining us. With me is John Cameron in the middle today, and we've got Richard Fields on the other end. And gentlemen, there seems to be a changing tide in how race is viewed in this country, and it's unclear what the end game is. A former exec who was fired for being a white man has been awarded $10 million in a wrongful termination lawsuit because he was sued because of his color of his skin. He was sued because he was the wrong race. And we all believe, race is essentially irrelevant, right? It should be outside of your own personal livelihoods. It should be your own personal life. Race is irrelevant in public life. It's irrelevant in your job. It's irrelevant in government. It's irrelevant in the justice system. Well, it should be irrelevant in all these things. But it no longer is. And this is going to be an interesting next few years as these things get settled out, because a lot of people have been let go or not let into college. We've had recently the colleges have changed their admission standards based upon race. This is it's a strange time to be alive. I didn't think I'd see it this way. I don't know. What do you guys think? John?
I kind of long for the years of Martin Luther King, who had a dream that everybody would be treated equal, and that's that's our position as well. And equality is not good enough anymore. We have to somehow or another make up for the perceived wrongs of generations past, and if we do that, then the current generations are saying, "Hey, wait a minute! Don't use me as a sacrificial lamb," which is kind of the situation with the white guy working for this large company. They in a fair, unjust, or a fair, just, non-politicized world, if a company wanted to increase its minority participation for whatever reason, we would have no objection to it. But when they are forced to do it by the government, that's another story. And likewise, when he sues to get his job back, in a normal situation, we'd say, well, the company made a decision. Was it because you were incompetent or because you're the wrong skin color? It's really not our concern, because it's between you and the company. And there are plenty of companies out there that won't discriminate upon race. And those are the companies who are going to get the most qualified people, precisely because they don't discriminate on racial grounds or any other grounds. They look for the best talent. They look for the hardest working people.
Well, yeah, I would like to see people be colorblind in hiring. What annoys me is that these institutions are violating court decisions that say they can't do this stuff, and they're doing it anyway. I mean, there's been many Supreme Court cases that have said that colleges can't base their admissions upon race, can't favor one race over another. There's employment law is full of cases that say you can't either hire because of race or fire because of race. You can't give preference to people because of race, and they do it anyway. And that's the difference between these large institutions, and they're all kind of government run, because I think this was wasn't this a medical company where this case was from? Can we mention the name of the company?
No, we could if I could read it on my screen here.
Norval, I think.
Yeah. Anyway, so I read a little bit of the background on it, and the company says they fired the guy because he delegated critical parts of his duties, and they fired him because of performance. And I was always taught and discovered that you're supposed to delegate critical parts of your job. That's the way you grow managers, and that's the way you get more done. You find people that can do it, and then you delegate things to them that they can do and you can do, so you can do things they can't do. And then they replaced him with two people. So apparently he was so incompetent that they actually needed two people to do his job. which I found kind of confusing as well. Now, the case is in, a jury found it in North Carolina. I don't know where North Carolina cases get appealed. Probably the Supreme Court in North Carolina. What circuit will they go to? Do you remember?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever. I don't know if it was a federal case or a state case. It was Novant, not Norris.
Yes, it's Novant Health. So it was a health industry, and Novant was the actual name of the company, just so we get it clear. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it'll get appealed somewhere because the company's not gonna, hold on, let me either talk loud or mute myself. That alarm will be off in just a second. I could. Thank you, alarm person. Appreciate it. All right. Wasn't that loud? I could hear it. Anyway, yeah, it's going to get appealed, and the lawyers will make a ton of money, and who knows where it will stand, because labor law is, typically the person filing the lawsuit has an edge. Judges and juries like to look on companies as evil, and and so if they can find in favor of the person, then they'll do so. In most cases like that are settled out of court. So nobody wants their dirty laundry. No corporation wants their dirty laundry aired in a courtroom. Usually the lawyers make a ton of money, and then they come to a settlement, and it never reaches court. So it'll be really interesting to follow this down the road and see what happens. But I found the company's comments and its hiring policy really entertaining, and that they fired him for delegating critical parts of his job, which that's how you grow business. You delegate to good people. And that when they replaced this incompetent guy, they replaced him with 2 people. So that's interesting as well.
Yeah, so the incompetence angle doesn't hold up. And as someone who has an interracial family and whose grandchildren are even more interracial than that, I find this whole modern view of race to be disturbing. And that actually brings us on to our next issue. There was a recent study, and it says more than a third of white students lie about their race on college applications. Now, why would white students, if they have all the benefits in the world, lie about their race in college applications?
They're emulating Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, well, actually, that's true, because a lot of them were choosing Native American. They were saying they have some Native American somewhere. And, well, in the modern world, how can you disprove it? What are you going to do, make them take a DNA test?
23andMe would give you a pretty good indication.
Yeah. Well, I always thought my father always told the tale about being part Indian and using. I think he used that for one of his excuses about where he acted so strangely when he had firewater, and it turned out after the 23andMe thing, I was whiter than rice. So, but it's funny that 48% of white males will identify as Native American, and white females identify. 15% of them will identify as black, whereas only 8% of males. So when they lie, they pick different things to lie about, and I find that interesting as well. And then it goes back to, why would they lie on these applications? Well, they're lying on them because the schools they're applying to are violating all the laws that have been heard in all these courts over the past 30 years about racial hiring preference, and they're hiring based on racial, or letting people in school based on racial preference. And anytime one of these cases gets to an appeals court or the Supreme Court, the court says, bad school, here's the law, you knew it was the law, you can't do this. And then they keep doing it. So anyway.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's nationwide. It certainly is in California with Prop 209. That you're not supposed to discriminate on race, but of course colleges do regardless. And it's just, it's another way of inserting race as a trump card or an excuse. A trump card if you think you need it because you're not competent enough to get in, or an excuse if you fail to get in. That's because they were, against me because of my race. I think people, we libertarians think people should stand on their own merits, their own ability, their own talent, their own industriousness, and race should entirely be a non-factor, whether it's college admissions or hiring or any other form of interaction between people.
Well, and I think it goes deeper than hiring. The duopoly that we have in this country, and we've talked about this over and over again on the show, relies on fear from its core voters in order to get elected and stay elected and get power. And if the regressives, I refuse to call them what they self-identify as, didn't have a bunch of people focusing on race, being told over and over and over again that the reason they're not making it is because of their race and there's prejudice and they need these programs and they need a bunch of highly educated, overpaid white people to run these programs to help them, then they wouldn't be in power. And so anytime they can stir the pot with a race card, they stir it. So that they can maintain their power and grow it. And
it's not a monopoly of the left.
No.
I refuse to call them conservatives. I call them preservatives. The preservatives have used race baiting since Reconstruction times. The anti-miscegenation laws, blacks can't marry whites, were a direct result of politicians of the time trying to stoke fears of racial minorities, blacks in that particular case. And in fact, our marriage license laws are a direct result of the miscegenation fear. People have to get a marriage license to make sure, in southern states, they had to get a license to make sure that they were of the same race. Otherwise, they couldn't get a license, couldn't get married. That went all the way to the Supreme Court in the Loving case, not that many decades ago, actually.
Well, and it doesn't end there. We can go. Martin Luther King couldn't get a gun permit, a permit for a gun, for this very reason, because our gun control laws are meant to keep guns out of those, the ex-slaves or the downtrodden. They're not meant for the rich and the powerful. They can always get around these laws. They don't have a problem with it. It's the average person. It's the underclasses that get their rights stumped. It's not the rich and the powerful. It never does. They always claim we're gonna even the score, but it never evens the score, does it? It's always the little guy who gets the boot on his neck, not the big and powerful guys.
Yeah, whether it's a racial minority or a socioeconomic minority, or it is by definition minorities that are used and abused by majorities, and whether the majority is racist or whether the majority is white supremacist or whatever the majority is, majorities try to impose their will on minorities. That's the problem. And of course, that case, the gun case, is going to the U.S. Supreme Court. People are challenging the Sullivan laws in New York, which of course are laws which say that in order to carry a handgun, you have to get a license, and the license issuance is may issue a license on the part of the sheriff or the gendarme, whoever it is, has the ability to issue licenses. They are not required to issue a license if there's no reason not to. They are given discretionary power, whether they feel like giving a license. And of course, most gendarmes, most judges, most people in positions of power feel like giving a license to people that look like them, whoever that might be, not to people that they're afraid of, or that they think that their constituents might be afraid of.
I agree with Richard. I think that's twice on this show. That might be a record. All the gun laws were the furor and fear about all the crime in Black and Italian areas of New York, is how they managed to, push through these extreme anti-gun measures. And what's nice to see is there's some good and the bad in this court case that Richard was talking about. A number of Black organizations, Black legal organizations, Black Guns Matter, and others have come forward there's a strong history in this country of people, oppressed minorities, arming themselves to protect themselves. Like after the Civil War, Black communities, especially in the South, people were heavily armed so that they could protect themselves from racist whites. And so people who are poor and in areas where there's high crime have a greater need for weaponry. And these are the people who are being denied over and over again their ability to defend themselves. Now, the shameful part of this was until, I think, 2014, the NAACP was a big promoter of gun rights, especially for Black people. But that worm has turned, and now they're of the opinion that people having guns to defend themselves adds to crime, whereas all of the studies, all of the good studies,
all of the empirical studies,
I don't know if it's empirical, but all the studies indicate that, again, more guns, less crime. And if you want to see what happens in a society where we're a murderous people in the United States of America, even if you take out all the gun crime and homicides and all the rest of this, and we'd still be more murderous than just about any other country, except for some of the drug warfare countries in South America and some of the interreligious warfare that's going on in some of the Eastern countries. So the guns are but in England, which is thought of as very peaceful, they're having, especially in London, a ton of knife crime. They're having people go after each other with machetes. They're having people on motorbikes do thefts, and they're holding, a big knife in their hand and all the rest of that. And also many of the home invasions that happen in countries with very low rates of gun ownership are just somebody big and brawny kicking in the front door and coming in and taking stuff. Because if they don't face a little old lady holding a 45 or somebody with a shotgun, what do they care? They can overpower and overwhelm whoever might be in that house, but not if that person has a gun in their hand. So, and then the other part of society that's kept from gun ownership are felons in this country. And it seems to me if you do the crime and serve your time, you shouldn't be punished going forward. But most of these people can't get high-end jobs. They have to live in, if they can get jobs at all, they have to live in low-income areas that are high in crime, but they are precluded from owning a firearm. And if they're found with one as a felon, a former felon, somebody who was in prison as a felon, then that's a felony, and they go back into prison for simply trying to defend themselves. It's ludicrous, and time for this stuff. Supreme Court needs to do the right thing to get rid of these laws, like most states have. Most states are in this country are now getting rid of any kind of carry laws, and that's a great thing.
Yeah. And we've talked about minority rights. Recently, from the NBA, Enes Kanter, I believe is how you pronounce his name, has called out Michael Jordan, Nike, the NBA, LeBron James for their stance on human rights when it comes to slave labor in China. We talked about what is it? I always mispronounce this. The Uyghur population. Did I get that one right?
Sounds right to me. Uyghurs, yeah, they're people of Muslim descent in far western China, far western provinces of China, and this is a real thing. I mean, the Chinese have been using and abusing Uyghurs in essentially a form of slave labor for decades now, and at the same time trying to destroy their culture, making them assimilate to the Eastern Han Chinese culture, whether they want to or not. And so it's a real thing, that a real evil that China is perpetrating. And
the fallout's very interesting. A coach in the NBA made a statement against the Chinese, the People's Republic leadership over, I think, Hong Kong. And he was forced to issue, the NBA gets a huge amount of, it's the National Basketball Association for your non-sports people, gets a huge amount of advertising revenue and purchase of goods and all the rest of that from China. And the Chinese government went up in arms when this guy said something about their treatment of people in Hong Kong, and he was forced to make an apology on air, or actually sent out kind of a press release or tweet or something. And LeBron James and a couple of these big stars came out and said, "Oh, no, we love China. We love China. We love China." It was basically, China's good. We love China. So what happens is if you say anything bad against China, they hit the NBA in the pocketbook. So this Enes Kanter plays for the Boston Celtics. When he came out and said this, he was talking about Hong Kong and the Uyghurs, whatever they are. I'm going to have to look up how to pronounce this because we're going to talk about them in the future, and I'd like to say their name right. They stopped televising Boston Celtic games, so hit to the income stream. We'll see what the NBA does, because they were, they were certainly very supportive of people rightfully calling out some racial injustice in this country. But when you point it out in foreign countries and it affects your income stream, that's another thing. Now, Enes Kanter is not what you call a champion of overall human rights, because he's actually a big supporter of the guy that Erdogan, whatever the current ruler of Turkey, had an ally. Erdogan. He had an ally that turned into an enemy, and this guy's pretty right-wing crazy, and Mr. Kanter's a big supporter of him. So he's picking and choosing his battles, as we all do. So it'll be interesting to see what the NBA does.
Well, what's interesting to me is that Chinese are essentially censoring the NBA. They're saying if you say nasty things about us, which are true, but not complimentary, we will censor your games. You won't be seen or heard in China, and you'll pay the financial consequences of that censorship. At the same time, we have a couple of essentially all of the large social media companies in the United States, Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest and Instagram. I don't know. The only two I follow are in LinkedIn. They're all saying that if you say something wrong about a virus that we've been dealing with for the last year, or if you say something wrong about racism or whatever it is, you will get canceled. You will get, which is censorship. And that censorship is taking place not because necessarily the companies want to, although many of them probably do, but it's really taking place because the U.S. government is calling their leadership in front of Congress on a regular basis, threatening regulation, dire, far-reaching, anti-monopoly regulation, and regulation to the extent that their business models would be severely impacted. Mm-hmm. So the U.S. government is telling these companies, you either kowtow to what we think should be done in the way of censorship, or bye-bye to your business model. So China, U.S., both are practicing the same thing. Now, arguably, the Chinese abuse of the Uyghurs is a heck of a lot worse than anything that's going on in the United States, but it's still censorship, and and free speech is the transparency, or provides the transparency, and provides the sunlight that prevents and ameliorates a lot of bad things. And to the extent that we get rid of free speech and freedom of press, it's to our own and to the Chinese own detriment.
I absolutely agree, and that I think that the governments of China have a huge amount of power, and the government of the United States has a huge amount of power, and it goes back to it. The people don't do bad things; governments do bad things. Now, individuals do, but massive bad things are done by massive bureaucrats.
Massive government, and we got just a few minutes left, and I want to get onto one more story. Americans are now preferring a smaller government, which is part of the solution to all of this madness we've been talking about here all day, all show long. But the question is, are they going to get it? Are either of these crowds, either are the Team Blue or Team Red, going to give us smaller government?
The answer is no, because historically, whenever people are afraid of something, whether it's COVID or whether it's 9/11 or whether it's the Red Menace during the Cold War or whether it's the Nazis and the Japanese during World War II or whether it's economic depression during the 1930s, whenever people are afraid of something, they run to government and say, help us, protect us from this evil. A majority of Americans do that. And so the government politicians say, okay, we'll do whatever we can to protect you. When the evil passes, those regulations, those laws, those infringements on liberty, they stay by and large. And all of the infringements on liberty since 9/11, the terror, the Patriot Act and so forth, security theater at airports, all of that stuff is staying. Likewise, all of the medical regimentation will stay as a result of the latest scare. Politicians use fear to ratchet up the power of the state. I think the book of Leviathan said it best.
I think that I just a little bit different take on it. They do use fear, but I don't think necessarily that people go running to the government. I think what the government does is a very good job of finding out whatever it is. In this case, it's the fear of 9/11 and the fear of a virus and all the rest of that to completely take charge of the economy and inflate money even more than it is. But I think it's not necessarily people running to government. I think it's government preying on those fears and then spending an awful lot of money magnifying those fears, so that people believe, because they're so easily swayed, that government has a solution. And I would suggest that anybody that's looked at the last 100 years of government in this country and thinks that any solution promulgated by a bunch of bureaucrats, which entitles them to even more power than they've already taken, and anybody that agrees with that is stupid, because history doesn't bear them out. There is some interesting stuff about people in this country generally want to be left alone, but they don't want to leave other people alone. And
exactly.
That was, I think all of us read a very nice Reason article. It's okay to pitch Reason because they do such wonderful work about this. People on the left want to be left alone to smoke dope, and I see no reason why not. If you're having a drink, why not have a joint too? They want to be left alone for to use whatever birth control or end whatever fetal life they want. That's a moral religious discussion. People on the right want to be left alone so that they can carry their firearm wherever they want, and they want to choose not to take the vaccine that other people want. But they don't want to. They want to be left alone themselves, but they want to control how other people act. And that's, once we get rid of that, we'll have some real freedom in this country.
Well, John, there was a time when this country started where fear of government led to a theory of smaller government, and we can hope that the fear of government is what's leading us to a next rebirth of smaller government. But with that, our time is up. We want to thank you for joining us, and please remember, from Team Counterpoint, to love everybody.
Thank you, John. Thank you, James.